Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Peptide PhDs. This is the show where tiny molecules meet big ideas for living better, living longer, and stronger.
Hey guys, I'm Dr. Alan Jones here with Dr. Mark Bartlett, and together we're exploring this wild new peptide era and everything that comes with it.
Well, almost everything, right? But if it affects your health span, it's fair game.
That's right. So settle in and let's dive into the signals that shape your life.
Right. We had a super interesting discussion last week, right, Dr. Jones, about basically it was called the good, the bad, and the ugly on GLP-1 receptor agonists. So we dug right into it. And you know what? Just 1 hour is not enough. We need a 3 hour program. We'll see if we can arrange that. But in the meantime, this is part two because we didn't really get through it all, and it's just such a fascinating topic. And we had a lot of feedback that people were interested in this. So we want to sort of share the rest of the story with you.
Yeah, that's right. Last week, we had some tremendous discussions, but this week, Dr. Mark, we are really going to get into kind of the what to look for when you're on these things and how to keep yourself from getting basically hurt. I mean, that is the fact of the matter of what we're looking for, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. And we expressed last week, like, and we'll continue this discussion. Like, it's an amazingly miraculous sort of avenue of intervention, and
yeah,
clearly it's helping with folks' health. And so we're not like here to rail against it, just to sort of give you the,
right.
as Dr. Allen said, what do you need to know if that's your strategy, if someone that you love is on these GLP-1 receptor agonists,
Yeah,
right? We
that's right. Yeah. And last week, we had a ton of conversations about the weight loss aspect of it, as you just mentioned. But we also discussed that along with that fat loss, that they also can drive a meaningful loss of lean body mass and, especially muscle mass, which, man, Dr. Mark, when you looked at the science, that loss can account for roughly up to 40% of the total weight loss. And that can have some serious implications for us long term.
Yeah, and maybe people who are new to the show are saying, "Well, why does that matter? Like, if I have less fat and less muscle, I'm just going to look really skinny and look really cool and lean and twiggy." But we are learning so much about the importance of muscle. It is clearly, the absence of muscle is really the best biomarker, I guess, of frailty.
Yeah.
Muscle, more and more, we're learning from muscle physiologists, and Dr. Jones is one of these muscle physiologists, that muscles are your youth, that your muscle is, I would say, like if you were going to talk about the intelligence of various organs in your body, the brain is number
Mhm.
one, muscle is number two. And how would I assess that? I kind of feel like intelligence is expressed through vocabulary, and the muscle has an immense vocabulary because of all of the endocrine organs, it by far out it monopolizes all of the other organs. And what I mean by that is when you flex your muscle, when you use your muscle, when you move your muscle, it produces over 600 different peptide and protein messengers called myokines.
Mm.
And we've talked a lot about those. So that's the intelligence of the muscle, and you don't want to lose it. It's hugely important. You got to keep that muscle.
Yeah, you do. Well, and Dr. Mark, you think about that muscle, uh, from an immunologist perspective on your side, muscle also drives the power of our immune system as well. So if we're losing muscle mass, you got to remember, everybody needs to remember that we're also losing immunity as well. Correct?
Yes, it's so true, and the muscle has a vocabulary, but holy cow, so does the immune system.
Sure does.
It's got a huge vocabulary. Think of it just in terms of the different types of immune cells that we have. We have, macrophages, we have T cells and B cells and neutrophils and eosinophils, like all of these different types of immune cells that have been identified. Even amongst the T cells, you've got CD8 cells, CD4 cells, like killer cells. You've got natural killer cells, and
Mm,
each of them, they all talk to each other. But
yeah.
in large part, we've discovered that the muscles are still conducting the orchestra because the myokines that are excreted from muscle actually sort of inform the immune system. So it's
That's
an
right.
amazing system.
Yeah, you mentioned the brain a while ago. I mean, there are myokines actually secreted from exercising muscle that actually impacts our brain as well. So
Exactly.
that
Brain
that
talks to muscle,
concert,
muscle talks to brain.
yeah, that orchestra, that concert is absolutely massive, and how they all talk to that crosstalk that goes on is incredible.
Yeah.
And you know what's exciting about that is we're just now learning about that, Dr. Mark. Literally within the last 10 years, we've just now started to figure out that, hey, we have these little things that are secreted during exercise, and we don't really know what they are, but we know there's a bunch of them. And now we're kind of just one at a time. And there's probably only 10 or 15 of those 600 that we really understand what they do.
Yeah. So
So,
if we have any young people in the audience, if we've got any teenagers or folks that haven't decided to go to college yet, I tell you, if you want a career where everything changes all the time and we're completely discovering new things, I recommend science.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you know, um, a lot of the things that we discussed last week, and again, how they, how the GLP-1 specifically, um, they can lead to this massive loss of muscle mass, but they're powerful compounds, Dr. Mark. They can have some tremendous benefits, right?
Yeah, this is you know why? This is why our Peptide PH podcast exists because
Mm,
like Alan has known about these myokines for years. As an immunologist for 40 years, I've been studying the language of the immune system, and it's all about peptides and these small proteins.
mhm.
Insulin was discovered over 100 years ago. So we've known that peptides exist, but mainstream sort of ignored it or really wasn't concerned until these incredible peptide-based weight management drugs came along, like the GLP-1 receptor agonists, and with all of their different names, like Ozempic and
Yeah.
Wegovy, right? So this is where the average Joe Six-Cylinder in the street said, "Wait a minute,
Mm,
like, what are peptides?" And because it demonstrates the absolute amazing power of peptides, they communicate directly with our cells. So there are drugs kind of act on systems, and they often sort of send this cascade of events that end up changing your body one way or another, right? But peptides are like mainstreaming that communication to the cell. That's why they're so effective. And
yeah.
so, what we've talked about then is the power of those peptides, and we're going to be talking about GLP-1 today. And Dr. Allen, like, let's dig into our, this just in section, which is where you find like the most amazing papers, and we
Mhm.
just try to make it simple for our audience. This one is like an incredible paper that you found. Let's talk
Yeah.
about this paper that you uncovered this week.
All right. Well, this particular paper, the title of the paper is "Weight Regain After Cessation of Medication for Weight Management." It's a systematic review and a meta-analysis. Now, Dr. Mark, this study was published in the British Medical Journal (BMJ). Super high-powered, very reputable journal. And so,
Yeah,
maybe
maybe we should mention just like what we're talking about when it comes to the power of this. Um, so we have what's called an impact factor with
Mhm.
journals. And that means like, I guess 100 is the highest impact. Is that right? Um, the British Medical Journal is like a 96 on the scale, maybe even a 98. So this is one that has a huge impact. Nearly everyone sort of in the regulatory community, in the medical community, they're going to be reading this journal. Like
right.
this is no small fry in terms of the publication.
Yep. And who it was ran by, I mean, you can look over here in the side at Oxford University, and I mean it was, this is a legit study. Let's just put it this way. But the purpose of this study, the main objective of the study, is to review weight regain after stopping a variety of weight management medications. Now, we're going to focus on the incretin based medications, or the incretin mimickers, that those are your GLP-1s primarily as far as the results and the outcomes go. But this study actually looked at all medications. And so to pull the information for this study, they actually looked at 9,288 individual studies, and they basically narrowed that down to 37 that they picked that met their criteria for the study. They had 63 intervention arms, but importantly, they had 9,341 participants in the study that were either overweight or obese. And
You know what?
so
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, what I love about this study is like, look at that. They've got like thousands of studies to choose from. And what are all those studies looking at? They're nearly all looking at like how much weight loss if you take this drug or do this strategy, right?
Mhm.
We don't often hear like, well, what happens later? It's
Yeah.
like buying a new car. I'm really interested in like if I buy the car, how long is that car going to last? Like, is it a lemon or is it going to last me 300,000 miles?
That's
And
right.
so I love this study because it didn't just look at, okay, it did look at, okay, that study showed this much weight loss this fast. But then what happened? What happened when people went off that treatment? Because whether it is your own sort of diet program, and I'm using sort of air quotes here,
Mhm.
because we're told that diets aren't necessarily good, right? You have to make lifestyle changes that are sustainable. But whether it's a sort of a hard to follow diet or whether it's a drug, almost by definition, people just don't seem to be able to stay on them forever, right? Not for very
Right.
long, often just a year or so. So what happens later? And that's what this study digs into, and like it's going to knock your socks off, ladies and gentlemen, what this study shows.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, ultimately, I mean, if you look at the headline, the main headliner from the study, that headline is pretty stark. It really is because on average, people regain about zero point 0.4 kilograms. Now, that's essentially 1 pound,
Right.
and that's in a very tightly controlled environment as well. But the people regained about zero point 0.4 kilograms per month after stopping and literally are within 1.4, 1.5, depending on what you look at and what outcome they were measuring. Between 1.4, 1.5 years later, they were back to their baseline weight. But the interesting part of that, and we'll discuss that in a little bit, is what made up that weight regain.
Yeah.
So,
And in fact, there's a graph that you're going to show later that's like, well, maybe it's even quicker than 1.7 years. And
yeah.
yeah, it shows what happens after that period. So what really jumped out to me is that those newer mimetics, like they're called incretin. You probably haven't heard that term yet, but um, and I'm not calling Dr. Allen something weird here. Incretin, it's
Yeah.
kind of a general term for these GLP-1 mimetics
Mhm.
like semaglutide, tirzepatide, right? These newer ones, like if you thought the first generation was powerful, these newer ones produce even larger initial losses.
Yeah.
But, as we'll show later, well, what does that mean for the regain, the rebound? Dr. Allen, like, I won't steal your thunder on this one.
Yeah.
So, let's
Well,
talk about that in a minute.
yeah, absolutely. Well, for the what you just talked about is so important because it seems like, we've got first generation, second generation, and now they're coming out with these third generation incretin mimetics. And what they're finding out is that, for the incretin mimetics overall, Dr. Mark, they started out at about 10.1 kilograms below baseline at discontinuation of the medication.
Right.
But
So
then
really rapid weight loss
really super rapid weight loss, but they regained about zero point 0.5. But for the
per
newer
month, right?
incretins per month, that's
Yeah.
correct. Here's the kicker though. The newer ones, the generation 2, generation 3, they actually started off with an initial loss of 14.7 kilograms. Okay. That's almost 30% more weight loss. But at the same time, the regain was about zero point 0.8. So about 50% more on the regain with a projected return to baseline of less than 1.5 years. And
Yeah.
so,
And here's something interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong. You may know more about this, but I'm just speculating here based on what I know. The original, like the first generation GLP-1 receptor agonists or mimetics, they worked on GLP-1.
right.
But the second generation, they discovered, oh, if we also work on another one of these sort of hunger hormones,
Mhm. Yep.
GIP, Let's
Right.
put in 2 peptides. One works on GLP-1, one works on GIP, right?
Right.
And then they were
Exactly.
more effective. And then the really new generation works on 3 fronts: GLP-1,
Right.
GIP, and
Glucagon.
glucagon. Yeah.
Glucagon.
So it's like a 3-phase attack. It's like now you've got like 3 3 fronts that they're working on that just are incredibly powerful.
Yep. Yeah. Well, let me show you something right here. So this is kind of the visual summary of the what they call the visual abstract. But pay attention to this area down here, because what they were looking at in this study overall is, number one, they were looking at the amount of regain on the incretin mimetics, right? Like we just talked about. But they were also looking at what is the difference between the weight regain of a weight management medication versus a behavioral weight management program. Now, let me define what behavioral weight management program is. That's diet, exercise, and some behavioral counseling to build habits over time. Sounds really familiar to, something like taking care of your diet, making sure you're eating right, making sure you're exercising right, making sure you're taking the right supplements at the right times, making sure you're getting plenty of sleep, and then your counseling on top of that, the 4 pillars of health right there.
Yeah, that's
So
called the standard of care, right? So if you're conducting a clinical study on weight loss, it's really, I think, the most ideal situation, right? If it's
yep.
whether it's like a diet and health plan, whatever, this standard of care is, how to eat healthy, how to move healthily, right? And that's
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, but notice this graph down here at the bottom of this.
Okay,
Dr.
let
Mark.
me before you go on, Alan, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are in their cars or listening to the podcast and they don't have the slide because they're not live, right?
Right,
So
right.
imagine a slide. So this is a graph. You've got the y-axis. The y-axis is the vertical line, and you've got minus 15 pounds is the bottom, then minus 10 pounds, minus 5 pounds, and then you've got 0. That's where you started. And then you got plus 5 pounds, right? So there's a line drawn across the 0. And then on the x-axis, that's the line across the bottom, that's time. And it goes from sort of before the 0 time point all the way through to 104 weeks. So that's,
right.
by my calculation, and I'm not an actuary, that's 2 years.
Right.
So you have 52 weeks, 1 year, you've got 104. So now, so just imagine that. And what we're doing is we're graphing here like weight loss. And then when you stop the program, weight regain. So in an ideal world, you're the perfect weight. So you're on 0 and that continues. It doesn't change. It doesn't go up or down. But here we've got people that were at 0 that were overweight. And now they're going to either go on a behavioral change program. And so that's on this graph, it's a pink line, and you'll see it start to go down. And on this behavioral one, it goes down to about the minus 5 mark, which means these people have lost 5 pounds.
Kilos.
Right?
Kilograms.
These are kilos, so 10 pounds.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks
pounds.
for the, I guess the units matter. I would have failed my biology class. And then so just imagine that you've gone on one of these sort of standard of care weight management programs and you've lost 10 pounds and you've said, that's it. I did it. I achieved my goal. Thank you. Now what happens? This is what this study looked at. What happens and how fast do you regain the weight, if anything? Does it stay at minus 10 pounds? Well, actually, you see the pink line sort of rises gradually, and it does look like we're over at 2 years, and you still have not reached that sort of maximum weight yet. You've gained back maybe half of what you lost, so that's actually not too bad, right? So I'm setting the stage for you, Alan. That's the pink line. That's like if you've done everything pretty much as best we know how, you'll lose that weight. And then, gradually, by 2 years, you haven't really actually gained it all back. That's actually not a bad scenario. Tell us about the rest. Tell us about the medications and the GLP-1s and what those lines look like. And those are in green.
Yeah, I tell you what, they're very concerning as I look at the graph, because you've got three different classes of medications here. You've got, the older class medications. You've got the, recently designed, and then you've got this newest generation, and the amount of weight loss through that weight loss phase is significantly different. In fact, you're looking at about, just between the generation 2 drugs and generation 3 drugs, you're looking at 5 kilos of difference in that weight loss phase. And versus the generation 1 versus generation 2, you're looking at about, what, maybe 2 kilos of difference at most, maybe, between those two phases. And so, but the amount of weight gained back on the generation 3 over that 104 weeks is much higher than the generation 1, generation 2 drugs, which they're much higher than our behavioral weight management programs.
Right. So let me recap.
In simple
So,
terms, yeah.
so let's look at the most powerful sort of what they're calling the newer incretin mimetics, right? These newer sort of, you've
Right.
got, instead of just sort of a 5 kilo weight loss or 10 pounds, these go all the way down to minus 15 kilos. So that's like a 30-pound weight loss, right?
Yep.
And so then following that, over the next year or two, by 76 weeks, you've gained it all back, right? And then if you project that line out, it actually overshoots where you were, and you end up increasing in weight sort of above and beyond. Correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Very alarming. Very alarming.
So
And then another
yeah.
thing, that this study showed, Dr. Bartlett, was cardiometabolic data as well, right? Tell us about that. What did you see there?
Yeah, this is super interesting. So when we do these weight management studies, or when others do, they're not just looking at sort of pure weight loss. They're, the whole reason why we're encouraging sort of to have healthy weight is because there's a whole lot of other biomarkers that are unhealthy when you're unhealthily overweight, right? So you've heard of these things like fasting blood glucose. So how well your body is able to control sugar. Because if you can't control sugar, you're kind of on your way to a type 2 diabetes situation. They look at systolic blood pressure. You might look at total cholesterol, triglycerides. And so during the treatment, they see the reductions in all of those things, which is what they're looking for. But after you, so just like the weight loss, all of those sort of bad biomarkers go down. And then after you stop, they're all drifting back towards baseline, but at small but very steady, relentless monthly rates, right? With projections that they're essentially back to baseline with just over a year's time. And let me just, sorry, I'm going to just detour a little bit here, guys. There's one called hemoglobin A1C. And it's maybe not something that everyone knows about. It's something to do with your glucose control, and they monitor this one. So hemoglobin A1C, what they basically do is your red cells, they've got they have a turnover. I believe it's about a month. I should know this better, but like your body creates the red blood cells, and they live about a month, and then they are recycled, and you've got new ones. And they measure basically what they call hemoglobin A1C means it's been glycosylated or glycated. It means that any sugar that is floating around in your blood that shouldn't be there, what often happens is that it gets sticky and it binds to the hemoglobin.
Yep.
So hemoglobin is this molecule that's in your red blood cells. And so if you take a blood sample, you can actually measure how glycated that hemoglobin is. And that's a measurement of how well controlled your blood glucose is. So it's a really good measure, because it kind of measures not just where you are now, but how well controlled your blood glucose has been over the last month or so. But here's like what I think is the kicker. It's not just a biomarker. What it's measuring is which protein, how rapid or how much all of the proteins in your body are having sugar added to them, glycated. And why does that matter? Because the more glycated a protein is, the stiffer it becomes. It forms these crosslinks with other bridges, other proteins. So basically it is accelerating the aging of your body, and it's not easily reversible. Like in the hemoglobin, maybe, but like in your skin, a wrinkle is basically irreversibly glycated proteins, collagen, that forms a permanent wrinkle in your face. So people who have high levels of glycation in the body are on basically a rapid aging program. If you want to stay youthful, you need to keep that number down. That's why I feel like this measurement is more than just about more than a measurement. It's a biomarker of your aging.
Yeah, I tell you what, Dr. Bartlett, when you look at all those cardiometabolic biomarkers, like, total cholesterol, triglycerides, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, all those, fasting glucose, HbA1c. But the scary thing for me is that when you see that you get some benefit while you're on, but as soon as you stop taking them, it's that return to baseline within 1.4 years. And I tell you what, okay, what benefit did you get? I mean, a short period of time where they were a little bit lower, but they're right back. And then when you look at the composition of the body fat that you've regained over that period of time, that gets to be pretty scary. And it certainly makes you sit back and go, what the heck? What is really going on with these things? And is there even a way that I could benefit from these things? That's the way I look at it. So
yeah, I think this is like really I think it's a take-home message of the whole paper, isn't it?
yeah.
Is that, and I think we all sort of understand this intuitively. If you do sort of a gentle, sustainable weight management approach with sensible exercise and diet, that is going to give you sort of a slower weight loss, but it's going to give you a much better sort of predictable outcome, because it takes like 4 years if you don't, if you sort of, you keep trying, but you're kind of slipping here and there, but it takes at least 4 years for that weight to return, and it's probably not going to be all adipose tissue. So, nothing is perfect. We all just have to keep struggling and pushing against entropy. But the paper says to me, man, these quick weight loss drugs, like, they can be incredibly effective on these biomarkers, but if everything's going to return to normal and maybe even rebound even worse after, just over a year, then we should think a little bit more carefully about it.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. If you look at you think about these GLP-1s, they make them really, really, really easy to use, and they're really, really effective. But what are they doing from a behavior modification standpoint? In my mind, they're really doing nothing, right? And so the study really points to a very, very important, very broad message that obesity is chronic, it is relapsing, and you can get short-term transient benefits from weight management medications. However, if you really want long-term benefits, you've got to have behavior modification. It's got to be a part of the program. That's just the way I see it.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like, so it's not just about, it's not even just the diet and exercise. I guess, if you're not even using a drug, it's about sort of rethinking things and that, what did you call it again? It's your behavioral modification. That's
Behavior
a part
modification.
of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. We're sort of not trying to gaslight this, but just kind of looking at this paper, what it's telling us is that rapid weight loss, sort of with an easy button, is oh man, for so many people, it's such a great relief not to have that food noise, and it's life changing. But I guess the question is, how sustainable is it? And no easy answers there, but at least I guess we're trying to be transparent here.
Right. Well, 45 pounds in 4 months is not sustainable,
Yeah.
nor is it maintainable.
Yeah.
And so if you want something that you can sustain, I've always said really no more than 1 pound a week I believe, and I would like to see 1 to 2 pounds a month. And if you could lose 20 to 25 pounds a year with consistent work, that's always been my philosophy of that is something that you can maintain and you can sustain because you're
Yeah.
going to build the healthy habits that you need to carry you 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years down the road. And that's what this show is all about. We don't want to impact people today. We want to impact people's lives 10 years from today,
Yeah.
20 years from today, right?
Yep. And there'll be
So,
folks listening to us that are like, no, I'm on a GLP-1RA. It's life changing. It's really helping me. And we're not going to try to discourage you from that. We're not going to tell you, no, you need to get off it immediately. What we're trying to say is, okay, just be aware
yeah,
and do your best. And there are some things that you need to sort of watch, right? So now if we go
yeah.
into chapter 2, sort of back to part 2 of everything that you want to know about GLP-1 receptor agonists, but we're afraid to ask, part
Mhm.
2, uh,
Part the
part 2. Um, then last week we talked about muscle and how important it is to keep it, right? That's one of the first things that you need to take care of. What else did we talk about last week in terms of things that we needed to take care of?
Well, first off, I think we talked about how um, we talked about the physiology of GLP-1s and how their number one job is to kind of orchestrate metabolism, right? But
Yeah,
we also talked about how um, you get the weight reduction, you get the improved insulin sensitivity, reduced risk of heart attacks and strokes,
right,
reduced inflammation. So we talked a lot about all of that, along with the reduction in muscle mass. So,
right. That sounds like a fair and balanced approach to me.
yeah, it's fantastic, but I think we got to look at them as a tool, right? They're a tool as part of a comprehensive toolbox, and really that's what we're going to kind of get into today, right?
Right. That's right.
So,
So just sort of recapping what we talked about last week, we did go into the muscle
mhm,
and we talked about when you lose weight quickly, sort of no matter how, your body isn't really picky about what it burns. It burns fat, but also muscle is lost. And if you've lost your appetite, that means you're getting less protein. And
mhm,
amino acids are one of the signals that tell the muscle to stay, right? So
that's
it's
right.
and you're getting less you're getting less micronutrients.
Mhm,
And there are micronutrients that also tell the muscle to stay, like vitamin D. So it just seems to me that it would be sensible. If it were me, I would try to keep the muscle moving. And as much as my appetite might be reduced, I would try to get more protein, just try to really focus on that, make sure I'm getting enough. And I might even take a simple um, vitamin mineral sort of supplement, right? It doesn't have to be an expensive one, but one that might provide some of those nutrients that are going, micronutrients that are going to be sort of coming in lower amounts because of your caloric restriction.
right, right. I mean, at all cost, the main thing, in my opinion, as a muscle physiologist, that we ought to really be paying attention to is limit the amount of muscle that we're losing. We
Yes.
have to do that because muscle is our largest metabolic organ. It's our largest endocrine organ. And every pound of muscle we lose those capabilities of that pound of muscle. And so
Exactly. And I
we
think we
have to pay
emphasized
attention to
last
that.
week that it's the GLP-1 receptor agonist, it doesn't target the muscle. It's not
Mhm.
that it is sort of directly destroying muscle. It's just that your body is going into this very deep caloric deficit. And so without the movement, without the nutritional support, then the breakdown wins. So you need to sort of fight against that.
Yep. Yep.
So you're
That's
fighting
right.
a different battle, right? You're losing weight, but now you're fighting the battle to keep the muscle.
Yep, exactly. And so, after laying out those details, now it's time for us to kind of discuss what to watch for when using one of these GLP-1RAs. And when we say what to watch for, what we're really talking about is how do we minimize the adverse reactions? How can we support GLP-1 receptor agonist use in a way that it's going to help us avoid those adverse reactions and long-term consequences. So there are several emerging concerns that have to do with long-term adaptation from GLP-1 receptor agonist use, right?
Right. Yep. The first one is muscle mass, right? Which we
Mhm,
talked
mhm.
about. And if you lose muscle mass, again, it's a biomarker of your youth. So you basically lose muscle mass, you gain frailty. And frailty is a term that
Mm.
that researchers in the anti-aging space or the healthy aging space are starting to use, right? This is a frailty is a term, almost a medical term now in this health span equation. And it's really all about your muscle.
Yep, absolutely. You also have to be concerned about some gallbladder issues because a GLP-1, one of their main mechanisms of action is to slow our gut motility. And so when it slows down that digestion and slows down the movement, then you've got to be concerned about some gallbladder issues.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure if I have an answer for that one, right? That's not an area of expertise of mine. I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
No, I think it has more to do with, again, you're slowing digestion, number one. You're eliminating the amount of food, or at least limiting the amount of foods that you're consuming. And so it's like you're doing all these things that are really not giving your body the ability to push through waste and toxins. And so I think we have a lot of slowing of gastric emptying. And to me, that is never a good thing. We never want constipation, and there's a lot of people on these GLP-1s. Hydration is another major issue because if we're not eating, a lot of times, for most people, or many people, I should say, the only time that they're drinking adequate amounts of water and fluids is while they're eating. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are
I mean,
several.
yeah, it's not, I'm an immunologist, you're a muscle guy. We're not really sort of necessarily sort of all about all of the physiological effects, but, that gallbladder is basically producing the bile and the things that help with digestion. If you're not
Right.
digesting as much, then it's empty. The gallbladder itself is emptying less frequently, more slowly. That leads to, it's designed really to sort of keep things flowing.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is maybe a higher risk of gallstones. And I think your suggestion was really good. Like, at least make sure that you're getting lots of fluids and, um, maybe really this is another thing sort of to mention is that, which flows into the next thing, right? The GI.
Yeah.
Like the GI is also designed to have sort of a constant flow of foods and fibers and nutrients and soluble fibers going through it all the time. All of that feeds the microbiome, and the microbiome feeds the cells that line the gut wall. So it's this whole ecosystem there. And if you slow things down and if you sort of shift that balance, then it can lead to gut discomfort, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Sure
another
can.
major side effect that people on the GLP-1 receptor agonists see.
Yeah. Yeah. Another issue with GLP-1s is people lose their mood and their motivation. So you basically have a flattening of moods, and people just kind of become down because your appetite, your motivation, your reward share neural circuits, they're all basically impacted by these GLP-1s as well.
Yeah,
So
on that topic, this is really an interesting new area of science. It's not that new now, but it's fairly recently discovered. There are certain things that sort of light up our brain, right? And you've all heard of dopamine, and you've probably heard of serotonin. So these are like happy, sort of,
mhm.
I guess, what would you call them? Happy molecules?
Neurotransmitters,
Yeah, these
Yep.
neurotransmitters that keep your brain happy.
Yep.
What people, I think, don't realize is that most of these um, neurotransmitters come from the GI.
Mhm.
So when you slow down the GI, you're actually impacting these neurotransmitters that normally sort of make you happy. So eating itself kind of makes me happy, but
Yeah.
the lack of eating kind of changes the dynamics. And
Yep.
so there is definitely an increase, and it's a measurable increase in depression and even suicidal thoughts if you really sort of end up messing with the gut too much. So that's um, mood flattening. That's, I guess, what I'd call it.
Yeah.
And you have to do everything that you can to monitor that. Like, make sure you're monitoring that. Make sure that there are other things that you can do to make you happy, right? That sort of boost those neurotransmitters, whether it's exercise, sunlight, connection with friends. All of those things are really important.
Yep. That's right. And we've already discussed about difficulty maintaining weight loss after cessation. So we talked about that with our study a while ago. But how about this one, Dr. B? This one I found really fascinating, and that is the issue of hair loss.
Yeah, that's such an interesting one. And that's what people are reporting. And
Yeah.
so, I think maybe the gut is one thing that people really notice. They may not notice the muscle, but they really notice the GI, right? The symptoms there. And then the other one that they notice and that is really concerning is hair loss.
Mhm.
And so we're hearing more and more reports of shedding in people that use the GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic. And it's especially after sort of the more significant the weight loss, the more you kind of notice this. So let's talk about why this happens.
Yeah, well, I will say that it's probably not the drug itself causing this hair loss. It's actually a stress response that occurs due to the rapid change in the body, right? You think about it, when somebody loses 45 pounds in 4 months, what do you think your brain's going through at that particular time?
Yeah. Yeah. There's stress that happens and it's from the brain, right? Cortisol levels definitely go up. And actually from the muscle, when you lose muscle mass, that also increases uh, cortisol. So this
Mhm.
is like, you've heard when I'm really stressed, like that's gonna impact my hair follicles. And I think that you're right. It's not the drug itself. The drug itself doesn't target the hair follicle. It is the rapid weight loss that stresses the body. The body kind of interprets this as um, this is like a famine. Like these are tough times,
Yep.
and so we're sort of in fight or flight, and that sort of increases cortisol and stress, and the body is less concerned about your beautiful locks of hair and more about sort of adapting in other areas, right? And these hair follicles are among the most metabolically active tissues in the body. They depend upon nutrition, steady nutrition, oxygen, hormone balance, right? So when you
Mhm.
have this huge, major shift in energy, like rapid weight loss, caloric restriction, illness, surgery, then your body basically prioritizes the survival systems, your heart, your brain, your liver, and so that can have an impact on hair growth. And interestingly, there's a name for it, right? They call it telogen effluvium,
Mhm.
and it's related to there are phases of hair growth, and so you actually often don't see this till like 2 or 3 months in. It's not an instant thing, right? Your hair sort of has this growth phase, and then this kind of like hang out and stay healthy phase, and then this loss phase. And so there's a bit of a buffer there. You don't sort of necessarily see it straight away, but a couple of months in.
Yeah, Dr. Mark, this is really similar to what happens to muscle for somebody that is very sedentary, right? Because you talk about how hair, you just talked about how hair is very, very metabolically active. That in fact, hair follicles are among the most metabolically active tissues in the body, I think is what you said. Well,
Yeah,
muscle is also very metabolically active. So it requires a lot of energy. When somebody's sedentary or when we're in a famine mode, I think what you're basically telling us is that muscle, well, in famine mode anyway, hair follicles are not really the focus at that particular time, right? I mean,
right.
your body's
Yeah,
not really interested in holding on to hair if it's that metabolically active and it costs that much energy to
right.
preserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all is not lost. There are things that you can do, right? And so if it's
Mhm.
about nutrient depletion and we understand that in times of stress, then again, I'd point to a simple multivitamin supplement.
Mhm.
The hair is especially sensitive to less iron, zinc, biotin, and
Mhm.
also in terms of, I guess you could call it micronutrients, amino acids. So it goes back to that protein story. Make sure you're getting enough protein, and I think that a multivitamin would really help. You probably have more thoughts about protein intake.
Yeah, you and I, we have a little bit of a difference in the amount of protein. I think you're more of the 30 gram of protein 3 times a day camp. I'm a little higher. I'm in the 40 to 50 grams of protein
Oh,
three
yeah,
times a day
especially if you're on
minimum.
a GLP-1, right? You sort of have to overcompensate. I agree with you.
Well, remember last week's study that we talked about? I mean, they were actually talking about 160 grams minimum of protein per day if you're on a GLP-1. So
Yeah,
it absolutely increases your protein requirement significantly over what a normal human being would need. So Absolutely. There's massive protein requirements if you're on a GLP-1.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So, there are hormonal shifts,
mhm,
changes in insulin, thyroid activity, even sort of your sex hormones, right? Your estrogens and your testosterones during rapid weight loss, those things all change. So,
yeah,
how can we help there? My answer is like, this is not an easy one, but I would focus on the muscle again because the muscle is this
mhm,
amazing buffer for all of those changes. Would you agree?
absolutely. Absolutely. If we focus on muscle, and there's two ways to focus on muscle again: diet, increase our protein, and exercise. We have to get our muscles contracting.
Yeah.
And if we'll pay attention to our muscles by doing those two things, and then, of course, adequate sleep so that we can recuperate and regenerate every day, then we will prevent a lot of these things from happening that we're seeing all over the place on GLP-1s right now.
Yeah, and let's
And
be
so,
clear on the type of exercise too, like because often in the
yep.
weight sort of loss milieu, people think, oh, on a treadmill, like running
Mm,
like crazy, working up a
no.
sweat. We're thinking more, if we're on the same page, Dr. Allen and me, I think we're talking like squats, walking up hills,
Yes.
like just sort of a resistance for the muscles that keep it.
Absolutely. Resistance training, you have to contract your muscles and you have to stress those muscles in a way that it causes those myokines to express themselves. And that myokine expression, in my opinion, is really what the massive benefit is towards GLP-1 therapies.
Yeah.
So,
All right. And then we've got the fourth thing here, and that is inflammatory cytokines. So, what do I mean by
mhm,
that? I was talking earlier about the immune system and how there's just so much communication going on. And we also talked about the gut and how, if you don't take care of the gut, then it becomes a little bit leaky and little things from the gut, which is kind of a sewer basically, sort of leak into the body and they get those immune cells really stressed because that's their job is to sort of stop anything that looks like bacteria or bacteria cell wall, right? So rapid weight change and fat mobilization can actually elevate those inflammatory mediators, right? It's getting
mhm.
those immune cells like totally revved up. That affects hair follicles as well. So, what do we need to do about that? It goes back to sort of what we talked about taking care of the GI. That's really important.
Yep.
Let me throw something else at you. Like a lot of Americans, in fact, I would say vast majority, um, it in terms of essential fatty acids, there are two, meaning these are fatty acids that your body can't make that you need
Right.
from your diet: omega-6 fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-6 fatty acids are pro-inflammatory, and meaning that they feed the parts of the immune system whose job it is to fight
Mhm.
bacteria and viruses and
Right.
parasites. So it's going to cause pro-inflammation. The what we lack, we get plenty of those from our diet. So don't worry about those, right? Just from the vegetable oils, the salad oils and stuff. And they're not bad per se, but the balance is important. We don't get as much omega-3s. Americans in general don't like fatty, smelly fish. Me, I have anchovies on my pizza all the time. I love sardines, but I dare not open a can of sardines in the office here. I'm just going to have everyone complaining to HR, right? So I take an omega-3 fatty acid supplement every day. I literally take 6 to 8 grams a day. That's 6 to 8
Yep.
big capsules of omega-3s to balance my immune system. And that will help with this imbalance and this inflammation. I promise you. So I think everyone should invest in a daily supplement of omega-3 fatty acids, often just called fish oil.
Yep, could not agree more. DHA, EPA, those are the
Yep.
two predominant omega-3s. Um, kind of since you brought that up, I mean, you have to think about EPA is really your anti-inflammatory omega-3. So if you're somebody that has a very high rate of systemic inflammation, your ratio of EPA to DHA, you may want more EPA. If you're somebody that's interested in, more brain health or something like that, then you may want to elevate your DHA
Yeah.
above your EPA on
Yeah,
the
there's
ratio scale.
definitely science on those 2 different kinds, but
Yeah,
for me, it's like, let's just keep it simple. If you're getting, let's just start with a fish oil supplement. Most of them have
yep,
sort of a fairly good ratio of the 2. just don't be deficient in EPA and DHA. Get a good
Yeah.
fish oil. Don't be afraid to have a lot. I sort of, we don't think about, oh, there's a little bit too much salad oil there. I might get too much of my omega-6 fatty acids. We don't. Like gram amounts. Like every day we're supposed to have at least a couple of grams. I think that's the minimum daily allowance
Yeah.
of those. And, so we're talking a teaspoon or two of fish oil. That's you don't have to worry about having too much there.
No, not at all. Not at all. So the way forward, I mean, natural support and balance. I mean, we've got a lot of things. We talked about fish oil as a way forward. We've talked about building muscle to protect metabolism during fat loss as a way forward. So we're given a lot of really, really good advice, but we've got quite a few others that we can add to this to really help our body prevent muscle loss, prevent a lot of these adverse effects, and really optimize the benefits and really support the benefits of GLP-1 use, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I love that. So we summarized this a little bit last week, but let's do it again for memory's sake, right? Build your muscle.
Absolutely.
And if you want to build your muscle, use protein and use peptides that naturally support. And in this case, our favorite peptide, of course, is the peptide that's in FIT, which is a fava bean peptide that has clinical studies that show that it inhibits myostatin and binds to growth hormone receptors in the muscle and really give the muscle a strong signal to stay. I think that's really important.
That's
And then
right.
there's another way to get natural growth hormones into the muscle. You know the answer to that one, don't you, Dr. Jones?
To get natural growth hormones into the muscle, you're
Yes,
talking about like optimizing our sleep.
absolutely.
So, I mean, if we're not sleeping, our muscles do not have the ability to restore and rejuvenate and replenish themselves. And so nighttime restoration is critical, especially if we're going to be on a GLP-1, which leans towards losing muscle mass. But if we can optimize our sleep and give our body more time to produce those natural growth hormones secreted at night while we're sleeping and recuperate, restore, rejuvenate, then we can absolutely override a lot of that signaling that occurs from the GLP-1 on loss of muscle mass.
Yes.
So,
And
and we have
so
a beautiful peptide to do that as well at Make Wellness called Restored. And Restored actually increases and optimizes our ability to achieve deep and REM restorative sleep in our sleep cycles.
right, and
So,
that comes from a peptide that was just only very recently discovered from brown rice.
rice,
So I
yeah,
believe that we were like almost first to market after that discovery, less than a year ago. So a brown rice peptide that has clinical studies that show that it actually helps with restorative sleep. So it's
that's
not
right.
going to sedate you. In fact, if you take this peptide, you might wonder if it's making a difference because I still maybe woke up at night here and there. It didn't knock me out like my favorite sort of sleeping pill did. It's not designed to do that. It's designed to lower the stress hormones that normally sort of keep us in fight or flight and stop us from sleeping. So
That's right.
highly recommend that. It'll give you
Yep.
more deep sleep, which is really important for
Mhm.
restoring the body.
Absolutely. And then the next thing is to balance stress. I mean, we're inducing stress through the use of a GLP-1. So, how do we balance that? And that's really important to do as well.
Yeah,
So,
and the rice peptide that I just mentioned will help with that because it will help.
mhm,
It binds to orexin receptors on the adrenal glands and slows that production of cortisol. But there are other ways too, and we have
mhm,
some really nice ingredients in a product that we have called Calm that will help with that.
absolutely. And then finally, eating real food, Dr. B. I mean, you have convinced me that steak and eggs needs to have some color to it. And so
Yeah, and I don't just
I'm a
mean
big
yellow and brown.
yeah, that's right. We're talking reds and greens and purples and all different colors. So fiber
Yeah,
and
those
polyphenols,
fiber,
that's
those
right.
polyphenols, they are about sort of basically fertilizing and keeping healthy the microbiome, right? And
Yep.
that, um, That will help the body's own appetite system. So even if you're not on a GLP-1, these are great because they that relationship between the microbiome and the cells that line the GI help produce natural GLP-1 in the body. But you've got to keep that microbiome healthy to keep the gut healthy.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So the future, if you're going to be on GLP-1s, you need a toolbox, and you need to be paying attention to that metabolic harmony instead of pharmacologic dominance. And that is critical. Harmony versus dominance.
Yeah. Well, we've got about 4 minutes left. There's a question from the Petri dish, chapter 3, and that is, can we go back to the basics for a minute? Like, what is a peptide?
Yeah.
Dr. Jones, I'm proposing that maybe we have our entire podcast next week on this question, and we will cover the whole thing. Like, what is a peptide? And what's the difference between a bioactive precision peptide and a synthetic therapeutic peptide drug? Does that sound good?
Absolutely. Those are some deep conversations, Dr. B. I'm telling you, we can go
Yes.
deep with those.
All right. So let's skip right through to chapter 4. Talk nerdy to me.
All right. Well, if you're still tuned in and haven't left us a 1-star review yet,
please leave us a 1-star review at least. Then clearly your standards are almost as questionable as Dr. Jones and his humor.
Which he has none. So that's right. It's time for Talk Nerdy to Me, the part of the show where we shamelessly combine science and dad jokes or memes or tweets.
Yep. And last week we had, we did some tweets, right? There are still some really funny tweets that are coming in. So here's Amy from Wisconsin, and she says, too poor for Ozempic, but too undisciplined for strict diet and exercise. Is there a secret third option?
Yep. And Casey says, anyone been raw dogging it with exercise instead of Ozempic?
Oh, heaven forbid.
Here's a good one, Dr. B. How about this one? Before Ozempic, after Ozempic.
And what you're seeing here is a picture of, like, you know how fat people look in like these spacesuits. So there's someone doing a spacewalk and he looks huge. I don't know what aliens think of humans, right? They're in these huge white suits with this glass visor in the front. But but post Ozempic, it looks like someone in a white tracksuit. Looks a little weird, but a little bit more human.
Here's a good one.
Yeah, what you see here is like there's a counter at the pharmacy, and on the left side you've got a sign that says Ozempic, and there's a huge crowd waiting in line. All rather big people, I might add. So it's a long line. I'm guessing it's like at least an hour wait for the Ozempic. The other guy, there's someone at the counter and he looks rather bored. He's reading a book. He's got his hand on his face. That's the sign above that window says ground beef, rice, and 10,000 steps. Yeah, crickets over there.
Oh man, and I think that is so true nowadays.
Yeah,
so people don't really want to work. So,
well, we've talked about how important protein is. So here's one. My friend told me about a wonder food that he discovered that contains fiber, protein, and good fats. And I said, that's nuts.
Oh my goodness. Dr. B, what do you call a 12-year-old protein?
I know what that is. That's a preteen.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, Alan, here's one. What do you call a Mexican bodybuilder who runs out of protein?
I don't know. What do you call that?
Well, he's my favorite Mexican bodybuilder. He used to be one of those nacho, what do you call them? The libre, the luchadors. Yeah, he's run out of protein, so now they call him No Way, Jose.
Oh my gosh. Oh, what is the opposite of a protein?
A protein? The opposite? I don't know if a protein has an opposite. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's an amateur teen.
Oh my gosh, he's not a pro. Dude, that's so bad.
That's so bad.
Yep. Well, now that we're a bona fide podcast and we're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, and Apple Music, we need to we're required by law to recognize some of our staff and sponsors. So I'd like to recognize today and give credit to our audience counter, and his name is Hugh Wake.
How about our audience estimator, Adam Ilion?
At a million. I love it. And our audience response analyst, lukewarm.
And our Australian tour guide, how do you say his name?
Matilda.
Joaquin Matilda.
My mother's middle name is Matilda. She's Australian, and she's always been embarrassed about that name. But lately she said, Matilda is becoming popular again. I'm cool with it. Just call me Tilly.
It is. That's funny.
Well, you've done it again, folks. You've spent another hour with us. You've chosen science over scrolling. Love that. You're our friends. Cell signals over cat videos, even though those cat videos are so tempting. And peptides over procrastination.
Well, now it's time to go make a difference. So come back and see us next week as we talk about Peptides 101, back to the basics, and get back to the person that dropped you on the call tonight or invited you to the podcast. Leave us a review, please. We love to hear from you. And come back and see us next week.
Yep. Love you all and see you in a week's time.
All right. Have a good one.